College football is back, and we're back on the big mountain with two very special Florida State Seminoles guests.
Hey, it's great to have you back on the mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve, and we are really happy to have both Doug Rohan and TJ Pittinger on. I think all of the FSU Seminole fans know who these two guys are. They are famous on YouTube and on X and everywhere that is Florida State Seminoles.
If you're a Florida State fan and you're not following these two guys on Twitter X, what are you even doing?
They're not a fan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. But hey, we'll throw it to them real quick. Then we'll let them say hi. Then we got some important questions to talk about. We want to talk about the Seminoles and what the heck is going to happen this year in Florida State.
And now, JY.
I'm excited. I'm excited. So anyway, let's start with TJ. How you doing, sir? First time on the mountain. We welcome you. Excited to have you on.
Yeah, thank you guys a ton for having me, TJ. Pittinger here. Double Fries No Slaw is what most people would know me from. But yeah, you know, if you choose to follow on X, don't take everything so seriously. But we try to have a good time over there, and appreciate you guys having me. I'm excited for tonight.
Awesome, fantastic. And Doug, we have him back, and we're going to be doing a football preview, and of course, we're going to keep him around. We're going to do a lawsuit kind of review of where things are at as well. He's been so kind to let us have his time. So welcome back, Doug.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I love being on the show. You guys have been doing a great job. I follow you guys to try and keep up with some of this stuff as well. But I have had your sticker over my shoulder in the office studio. So I've been giving you all a shout out on a couple other shows when I was on with John Kurtz the other day. So I'm glad to see your numbers are skyrocketing because it's well deserved. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, we appreciate that. We are almost to our 1 year anniversary here. So kind of crazy how things have gotten.
Yep.
Hey, we're not talking about us. We're talking about the Florida State Seminoles. So you've got the first question, I think, for TJ, and let's get into it.
Yeah, first question. TJ, I want to give this to you first, and then Doug can chime in if he has any additional thoughts. I kind of already asked Doug this question before on another one, so it's good that we have you on. So after last year's historically awesome defense, okay, and to me, and I told Doug this before, I think last year, and I'm not an FSU guy, I'm a Big Ten guy, I'm a PSU fan. Last year's Florida State defense to me was one of the best college defenses I've seen in the last 20 years. So after that awesome historic performance of last year, there's a lot of players that left, okay, that, players left in the draft, high quality players. What do you expect to realistically see this year from the defense? Do you think they can kind of maintain that level, or do you think Florida State fans, should they expect a little bit of drop off?
I wouldn't, I don't think I'd be too shocked if there was some drop off early, but I think the biggest concerns I maybe have about the defense would be depth at the defensive line, and then just the linebacker position overall, which could be pretty good, but it just is unproven. What Florida State was able to do last year defensively was rotate guys on the defensive front better than anybody in the country, right? And they had so much depth, and they were able to do that. And it would frustrate fans at times, right? Like it'd be like a big 3rd and 7 or a big 2nd and 12, and they'd rotate their better defensive linemen out. And we ended up giving that up, right? Whether it was to Virginia Tech or Syracuse, just whomever. And fans would go nuts. Like, why did they take those guys out? Well, it kept those top line guys so fresh. And the historic defense that you're referencing, like everybody watched the UF game and the Louisville game at the end of the year in the ACC championship. And you saw Jared Verse and Braden Fisk just absolutely going off. And the reason they were able to do that was they rotated so much. Well, a lot of those guys that were rotating last year are now going to be a little bit higher up. So they've got a lot of experience, right? And then they've gone out in the portal and they've kind of done what they've always done and done a good job there. They lost a lot of guys to the NFL, and there's no getting around that. They lost 2 really good corners. They lost a safety kid. Akeem Dent had been in the program for 5 years. Obviously, Jared Verse and a lot of the defensive line. And so a lot of people point to that, man. What they lost on defense is huge, but people really aren't talking about, man, they could have Pat Payton going 1st, 2nd round next year. They could have Darrell Jackson, Josh Farmer being like top 3 round guys. Marvin Jones Jr., could go off this year. He could be a 1st, 2nd round guy the year after. I think the best cornerback in the conference is Azariah Thomas. He could be a top 3 round guy. Fintrell Cypress was the guy that transferred from Virginia. This is his 2nd year in the system. I mean, I think he could be a potentially a day 2 guy, if not like early day 3. I think they've got the most athletic safety in the country at Conrad Hussey. So I think that I'm sorry, Shaheem Brown, and then Conrad Hussey, the young guy that's going into his second year. So I think they've got a ton of talent. And so, yeah, the rotate they did last year to give guys a lot of experience, the amount of talent that maybe people don't know because they were backups last year is really high. And so, yeah, could there be some drop off? Yes. But I mean, you're talking, last year was a top 5 defense. This year might be like top 10. I think it'll be marginal drop off if any.
One of the things that the country learned last year is Mike Norvell is a pretty good coach, and such a good coach that Alabama wanted him. There's no denying that. He opted to stay, and one of the subtle things that we picked up on late in the season, to TJ's point, was this idea of load management. Well, now with a 12-team playoff, you're going to see all the countries picking up on what Florida State was doing by necessity in both educating that second tier, second round guys, the 2 deep roster, but also because there was such a significant fall off from that first line. Yes, there was a reason why the Georgia game went the way it went, because we knew our 2s and 3s were nowhere near the quality that we needed to play at the Division I level across any of the conferences, let alone in the Power 4, Power 2 conferences. But what happened last year was magical, and goes back to your original question. When Jordan went down, they knew the offense was Jordan. The defense knew that they had to kick it in another gear. So when you look at the annual numbers, the historical numbers, top 15 defense, top 10 defense, to your point, those last 2 games, they were a top 2 defense. And that is the heartbreak for me, to circle up to your question, is I would have loved to have seen what it looked like going against Michigan, what it looked like going against a Georgia who should have won and beat Alabama and played Florida State in the Sugar Bowl. That's what I feel Florida State got robbed of, and the country got robbed of. How good could they have been? And then as far as this year, exactly what TJ said. To me, I'm most interested in Conrad Hussey. In Fentrell Cypress, because he underperformed last year. I don't know if it was because it was an injury, but him and Azariah Thomas in the backfield, I mean, they are going to put a lid on the offense of whatever team they go up against. And then, the final exclamation point on how good that defense could have been is the tackle that was supposed to start that got held out all year long. He was going to be added to that stellar defense for that last bowl game. So that the defensive line is better than they've been in a long time. Yes, we lost some linebackers. Yes, Kalen DeLoach is running with the ones in Tampa Bay, but you're not going to be seeing too large of a drop off after all.
Well, that's great news. And I also like what you said there, Doug, in terms of load management, and something that any of these teams that want to make it to the national championship game, and they're playing how many more potential games this year?
16 or 17 games if they don't get the first round bye.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just a lot more snaps for these players. And TJ talked about having these guys come in and out and whatnot, and a lot of injuries, not all injuries, but, if you're going to run these guys into the ground, when you're tired, when your muscles are tired, that's when you see more of these injuries type of happening. So it could also, if they're going to be playing 16, 17 games this year, not only be healthy for all 16 games, but be healthy throughout the entire season as well, potentially. And it was said, it helps give the other players who are now going to be some starters for Florida State or any team, that experience as well. So a lot of loss, but I love to hear that, maybe not too much of a drop off here going into next year. So we got to ask the question, and I'm just going to say DJU, and I'll let the professionals say the real word. But we need to know from you guys, what do you think Florida State needs to get out of DJU this season to be a real championship contender in 2024?
Well, DJ Uiagalelei has been a fantastic addition to the offense. Just his presence, just the leadership he's provided. We have some good arms behind him. We could have rocked with Brock Glenn if we needed to, but he's not a Jameis Winston. He's not a generational talent that could come in redshirt freshman year and lead us to the title game. So what we need DJ to do what he did last year. But in order for him to just do what he did last year, you need to ignore, again, what Mike Norvell and Tony Tokars have done historically. And that is take a person who is going to quit football altogether, or move to wide receiver and turn him into a Heisman finalist in Jordan Travis last year. If he doesn't break his leg, he wins that Heisman trophy, just like the Tennessee quarterback 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So the coaching staff is going to put him in a place to succeed. We all agree that Norvell is certainly a top line schemer when it comes to the offense. All we need for him is to do the same or slightly better. You give us a 60% completion. I saw a statistic on Twitter the other day. No quarterback in the Mike Norvell system going back 12 years has had less than a 60% completion percentage. If you get a 60% completion percentage, add to that the fact that our running game is going to dominate the offensive play calls anyway. We're looking at a 55 to 57% running attack for our offense. You throw 60% completion rate on top of that, give me anything less than 15 interceptions on the year, and they're going to have 10, 11, 12 wins.
I know it'll be DJ's first year there. But even going back, like, I mean, everybody thinks about what, and Doug mentioned what he did with Jordan. And, you look at really what he did even before that, like when you go back to Memphis and you look at his quarterbacks, the last year that he was at Memphis, his quarterback had threw like 64%. And then the next year after Norvell was gone, he was like down at 60. And so just like that and I'm not saying, it was all Norvell, right? Like at the end of the day, you got to make the throws, and that's not a monumental difference, but his touchdowns were down. His completion percentage was down. His yardage was down by like 700 yards. And so, yeah, I think Mike Norvell is a pretty quarterback friendly coach. And I think that helps. And so I kind of agree with Doug Florida State's expectation, this year, I like to, somebody asked me what they think Mike Norvell's expectation is. And I've asked him like 3 times, and he keeps rolling his eyes and telling me my expectation is for us to get better every single day. And I'm like, no, but I really want like an answer, coach. So, but anyway, so what's the national expectation from Florida State? Well, right now their expectations are to 9.5 wins. They have the best odds to win the ACC, and they have the best odds in the ACC to make the playoff. And I have a hard time thinking that Mike Norvell's expectations aren't at least higher than the national expectations, right? Not just making the playoff or not just winning the ACC. So all that said, I think to get to where the nation expects Florida State to compete for the ACC, to make the playoff, I think exactly what Doug said. I think you need DJ to play exactly like he did last year. 27-7, just under 60% completion, and you'll probably win 10 games. If he's any better, if he takes any bit of a step forward, if he can get to 30-10, or if he can throw for 3,500 yards or however that looks, whatever that step forward is, then I think they have a chance to compete for just about anything they want, right? Like get to a semifinal and, roll the dice at that point on what could happen, right? I'm not going to say that this team is going to go out and beat Ohio State and Georgia in back-to-back weeks, but I think that if you get a step forward out of DJ, you're going to expect a really, really good year from Florida State.
For sure.
Let me just add on to the end of what he said also to provide some context. There are question marks. Look, we have rose garnet colored glasses, but wide receiver is the question mark. The quarterback can make all the great throws, but somebody needs to catch. We don't have some of the hands problems we've seen with past transfer wide receivers, very talented wide receivers who make very important 4th down catches against our rivals, but then can't catch a ball any other game of the season. So we're seeing consistency, but we're seeing consistency, in the intermediate game. And what we want to see is DJ being able to put a couple of those over the top bombs into the hands of receivers, because again, we've got 7 running backs that can play on any Division I football team. So you're going to have teams stacking the box and leaving those wide receivers on the outside one-on-one. So to that point, that's where we're talking about that 60% completion percentage on an outside receiver, or that slot receiver running the post, the skinny post. The numbers are going to be insane. There was one game at Oregon State last year where he averaged 20.3 yards per completion. That's what we're going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing, what was it? The Michigan quarterback in the bowl game had an average throw of 3 yards or 5 yards. That's not DJ's game. What you're going to be seeing is he's going to be 12 of 18 for the game, but he's going to have 340 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people say all the time, like, well, can he do the thing? Can he do what Jordan Travis did? And the answer is no. Like, he's just not the same player, but he can
Right.
do a lot of things that Jordan couldn't do either. Right. And I love Jordan, like, outside of probably the 3 Heisman winners, he's most people's favorite quarterback for the way that he played the last, that is not like a dig at Jordan Travis at all. But there's a lot of things that physically just he couldn't do. And there's some things that like DJ couldn't do that Jordan could do, but just
we didn't want him to do
are,
because we didn't have a backup to put in there once he twisted his knee.
Just didn't need it. And so, yeah, I think that people will be impressed with, if things go like we want, right? Let's try and be a little bit unbiased, but if things go like we expect or like we want, I think people will be pretty impressed with what they end up getting out of DJ.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. We ready to move on to the next question?
Let's go. I'm anxious for this next question.
Okay, so just a reminder, guys, on the Big Mountain here, we're a Big Ten and Mountain West show. So a lot of our viewers may not, be dug into Florida State like you guys are. The national perception of Mike Norvell, and Doug, you've talked a lot about Mike Norvell and what we've seen from him. The national perception really that I hear all the time is that he's been crowned the king of the transfer portal, that he's been able to use it and not in a bad way at all. Like, I've not heard anybody, at least I haven't, say that in a bad way. It's all been a good, that he's figured out how to do it and the most effectively out of any coach in the country. So we talked a lot already about DJU. What are some other transfers that fans who maybe aren't, like, again, Big Ten fans that are looking at Florida State, like, hey, they might be in the Big Ten here soon. What are some other transfer players and we'll go to TJ for this first. What are some other transfer players we should be looking at that you think could make a big impact and get them back in that college football playoff hunt?
Yeah. So I want to back up just a little bit and talk a little bit about the portal, because Mike said this in a recent, just to follow up on the King of the Portal thing.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of people ask, like, what, I heard somebody ask him, like, to his face, like, why have you been so successful there? And his answer was, we look for the same thing in the portal that we do in high school recruiting. We want guys that are going to come in and fit and buy into the culture and do the things we ask them to do and work hard and do the little things. And we don't care what year they are in college. And he's like, that's why it works, because we don't tell portal kids one thing and high school kids another. We're telling everybody the same thing. You're coming here to work and buy in. And if you don't, we don't want you. And so anyway, which is, I don't know, probably a little bit too simple, right? Like, oh, well, that makes kind of sense. Like, good one, coach. But I don't think that everybody treats it the same way. So offensively, I think Malik Benson is going to, Doug was like, who's going to step up at, at the wide receiver position? Florida State not only needs him to, but also I think he's the guy that, probably leads the team in, if he led the team in, receptions, yardage, touchdowns, all the above, would not surprise anybody. Malik Benson from Alabama. He was the number 1 JUCO player when Alabama took him. And then he didn't play a ton last year for Bama. Obviously, they're just absolutely loaded. And they had a guy who, doesn't throw the ball very well throwing at quarterback. But I think he's a really big one. Roydell Williams is another one that I think is kind of a big deal. Doug talked about how deep the running back room was. I think both those guys are going to have really nice years offensively. Roydell's numbers may not even be insane, just because I think we are so deep at running back that, somebody said, is anybody going to go for 1,000 yards at FSU? And I was like, man, I don't know if anybody's going to go for 500 with how much they are going to spread the ball around. But I assume somebody will get to 500 just because they break off a couple 80 yarders, here and there. But I'll go. I won't mention every transfer we got, but those are my big two: Malik Benson and Roydell, and I'll let Doug take a few more.
Yeah, I've got a couple I want to keep my eye on. First off, never played a down of football in my life. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm the fan. I'm the fan perspective here. But one of the unheralded transfers that really gets buried in all of the talk of all these great, amazing transfers is Jacob Rizzi out of Harvard. Had to wait until he graduated to come down as a graduate transfer. So he's joining late. He's joining on the normal schedule. There's so many people that early enroll now that it feels like it's late. But the thing we heard from Odell this week is that he is very capable of providing that 6th rotational piece on the offensive line. If that's the case, if we have 6, 7, 8 quality offensive linemen that we can rotate in, then there's that load management issue that we were talking about for the playoffs. So if Rizzi can step up and make that transfer from the Ivy League to, a Power Four conference, that's going to be very impressive. I'm also very personally interested in Marvin Jones Jr. I was invested in him when he was in a recruit. I talked to his dad at one of the games, when he was searching, and those were the Dark Willie Taggart days. And he was just like, man, I don't know that I can see him coming to play for Coach Taggart. I've seen his practices. So to have him circle back, and then there's a second layer to that. We've had the Jermaine Johnson. We've had the Jared Verse. Do you mean to tell me that Mike Norvell is going to hit 3 for 3 on amazing defensive ends that can really wreck games? And you put them opposite Pat Payton, and they both could possibly go in, the first 2 rounds of the NFL? I mean, that would be an amazing storyline if we can get him. And then the last one, just because his name is fun and I want to be able to say it, Sione Lolohea. He's also has joined DJ from Oregon. But again, that defensive line is going to be key. We know we have the best offensive line we've had since 2013. The question is, how good can that defensive line be? If somebody like Lolohea can step up and really, again, provide that depth, this is a championship caliber team.
Great names. Really appreciate that, because again, we know DJU and on the national level, right? That was kind of one of the big gets. It's great to hear some of the other players that you're talking about. So we've talked players a lot. I want to talk about games. Last question for you guys. Let's get into some of the games. And we want to know from both of you guys, what do you think is the most important game in terms of just showing the national audience, and maybe most importantly, the CFP committee, who I know you guys don't like to talk about, but we're going to have to talk about them. That Florida State means business. They are at the top. And let's just assume for some reason, they don't win the ACC. Now, we just did our CFP playoff brackets. We both had them winning the ACC, and so they get that bid. But irregardless of winning it and getting that bid, what game do you think sets them up for a really strong playoff performance, or getting a strong ranking in the CFP?
Oh, look, I will give credit to the College Football Committee for one issue, and that is the ACC is weak. I think the SEC was down last year, and they didn't deserve to have their representative in there at all. It should have been a 0 SEC year, because that was the year that the SEC stunk it up in all the games. So I understand the question and the matchup, who is going to stand out. Without knowing what the opponent's records are, I don't know if Clemson is going to be undefeated when we host them. I'm sure that'll be the easy answer. TJ might take that one. For me, it really starts week 0. Georgia Tech will both be at the game in Ireland. But that's where we're going to find out. What kind of team do we have? If we're in a slugfest, a defensive slugfest, and we're running a 2-point conversion at the end of the 4th quarter to win 13-12, we have big problems, and we're not going to be able to impress the committee.
Yeah.
The offense puts it together, a couple nice bounces on some fumbles, and we make some deep shots, and we put up a 35-17 like score. Then I think the whole country is watching and says, Mike Norvell is the dude. Look, I'm not trying to be a bootlicker for Mike Norvell, but he has done everything he's done up to this point with one quarterback who was, an ancient, wise old man in the system. What can he do with the first new guy? If he can put together an offensive performance in Ireland in week 0, that's what's going to tell the College Football Playoff Committee you need to pay attention.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and then I'll maybe point to a couple more. But I kind of agree, maybe even for like a little bit of a different reason. But I don't think it's accurate, and I think that the people who the big saying now is, oh, ball, right? The people that know ball don't care about it. But the last perception or really the lasting perception that is of Florida State right now is, one, they're whiners. They don't like their conference. They're trying to get out. They're disruptors. They quit. None of them played in the Orange Bowl. I don't believe that. That's not my take, but that's the perception. They got blown out by 60, the worst bowl loss ever, all this stuff. And so to me, it's that first game, and it's going out there and letting all that build. No one else is playing at that time. And again, hopefully by the 3rd quarter, everybody's turned their TV off and nobody's even watching it anymore, right? They've found the pregame for the next show or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. To me, it's that opening one. I have a very hard time looking at their schedule thinking that Notre Dame won't be a top 10 team when we go up there, right? It's hard to know. Could Miami be good this year? Absolutely. Could Clemson be, if they would have upset Georgia, or even if they play Georgia close and then come to Tallahassee, that'll be a pretty hyped game in week 6. Miami, Clemson feel like question marks. It would take a lot for me to think that Notre Dame's not a top 10 team when we play them. Their schedule is just garbage. They don't play anybody this year. They get Elko in game 1 of his tenure. If they can't win that, then they, like we said, they've got bigger problems. So yeah, I think that Notre Dame one would probably be my follow-up to it. Now, it could be Clemson, could be Miami. Shoot, I mean, stranger things have happened, I guess, than even Florida being a good team. But with all the question marks, I think that Notre Dame one's going to be pretty big. I think there's a chance it's 2 top 10 teams. And I think Notre Dame may be fighting for a playoff spot. They may be locked into a playoff spot by that point if they're like 9-0. So that Notre Dame one feels pretty big later in the year too.
So I got a perfect follow-up question then. If you guys have time, do you have time for another follow-up question here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we'll go to TJ first with this. So a couple years ago, Georgia used the whole disrespect card as a motivating thing when, to get them through this. Somehow Kirby convinced, even though they were ranked number 1 or number 2 all throughout the season, that the media and the fans disrespected them and didn't, give them enough credit or whatever. And they went out and won the national championship a couple years ago. Nick Saban has used that, over the years. He's famous
poison.
for it. Yeah, rat poison. Yeah, all that stuff. And especially from you, TJ, because I think you're covering, every day. You're a beat reporter, correct? You're there.
Yeah, maybe just a fan.
He's beat adjacent.
Okay.
He's beat adjacent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
somewhat aware, but
so my question for you is, what's the carryover from last year? And not necessarily like not a hangover, but what is there an attitude around the team this year? Is there because I mean, that's the biggest snub that we've seen in the college football playoff era. Are the guys totally, they always say, oh, it's a new season, we're starting over, we're going to take it one game at a time, all the cliches. Do you really see that as being the case? Or is there an attitude? Is there a chip on the shoulder? Is there anything there that they're kind of using as motivation to go into this season after that snub? We saw, on Sports Center during the selection show, the guys with their heads down. Have they used that as a motivation factor? Or is it basically just the team doesn't even think about it?
Yeah, so I'll answer first. Mike Norvell has told me twice he doesn't use it. He doesn't bring it up. He doesn't talk about it. And I believe him 100%. I don't think he would just lie to me and say something. The players absolutely do. Pat Payton told me at ACC Media Days, he's like, I'm going to be 50 years old and remembering this. Josh Farmer's going to be like, man, I'm going to be telling my grandkids about this. He said from the podium at ACC kickoff, like, I'm still pissed off. I was surprised that they didn't bleep it, or, I guess it's just the word pissed. But yeah, they're upset. And what surprised me is when I've talked to people about it, I was like, well, maybe the guys that were there will care. But you think about it, so many guys are in the NFL, and then there's so many transfers and there's so many freshmen. And what they've said is that the guys who transferred in have said, we want to go win because we know, like, we didn't care 6 months ago. But now that we've spent an entire offseason with you and you're our brothers and we love you, we're like, how could they do this to you? Like, so they've said, like, the transfers and the young kids are even like using it as a chip on their shoulder to say, like, well, you did my brothers wrong. I'm going to prove it to you now. I'm going to show you that you made the wrong decision. So yeah, to answer your question from the team specifically, I don't think it's like Mike Norvell's mantra when they break the team down at the end of every huddle, but I think the players, these 18 to 22-year-olds are certainly remembering it and certainly using it. And I think all athletes do that, right? Like Kobe used to find that little one edge, or that Michael used to find that little one edge that would get them over. Michael said in his documentary, he looked at me funny when I was eating my steak, so I torched him for 60 the next game. I think it's very natural for athletes. And I mean, it'll be natural for fans this year too, when, we get over to Dublin and everywhere else. But I think that it's natural. And yes, the players are absolutely going to use it this year.
I've got a little bit more Mike Norvell bootlicking to do on this one. It's everything he said is true. I would have said almost word for word what TJ said. But here's the thing that I would like to add to it. Mike Norvell was a young coach when we got him. One of the youngest, that was hired, one of the youngest candidates that was out there. He's learning on the job too. And that's another reason why we want to see what this year holds. Okay, you have the mantle, you have the top 5 coach moniker now. What are you going to do with it? And I don't know the statistics. People who remember these games and have didactic memories can prove me wrong. But I want to say out of the 12 games last year, Florida State had the ball in the opposing team's territory probably 6 of those times, and either kneeled the ball to end the game or just, ran out the clock without running up the score. He thought, he lived in a world where a win was a win. And he thought getting to the end of the season without a single loss was going to be enough. And he's now learned that that was not true. So I hope, while he publicly says the right thing, that he's got Darth Norvell somewhere in him, that this year is going to step on necks and is going to say, yes, I'm going to kick that field goal from the 30-yard line, because a 12-point win is more impressive than a 9-point win. I want him to have adjusted and learned, and I want him to say, we're not going to kneel the ball at the 4-yard line to end the game anymore.
Doug, I'm not sure how old TJ is, but I can remember, I know you can remember Bobby Bowden days being up 55-21 in the third quarter, and we were running fake reverses with deep bombs, never let up. Let's score 100, put 100 on them.
You want us to stop scoring? Stop us.
Yeah.
Well, last question I have, I know Doug is, I don't know about TJ, both headed to Ireland.
Yes.
All right. Well,
We're going to be podcasting from there.
That's fantastic. We will chime in and, well, not chime in, but we will view, watch. I hope you guys have a safe trip. I hope you have a lot of fun. I know Doug said a while back you were planning something maybe. I don't know if that's still in the works. I'll be watching. I want to see if something interesting happens. But yeah, with all that, we thank you guys for coming on. This was fantastic. Like Steve said, we're not massive Seminole fans, but we've been following the Seminoles. Doug knows we've been following the lawsuits, and it's fun to actually talk football. I mean, let's get to it here.
Yeah.
Oh man, it is time. So
Have a pint in
20
Ireland
days.
for us.
We will.
Absolutely.
So hey, we thank you guys for coming on. With that, hey, make sure you give this one a like, subscribe if you like our content, and we'll see you guys next time on the Big Mountain.